So today I wanted to talk about the reader and writer interfaces, and the reason I want to talk about them is because they're probably the most important interfaces you could possibly learn in Golang, but also because a lot of people don't understand them, and a lot of the standard library is implemented around these two interfaces. So if you're having trouble with understanding how the reader and writer interface work, consider this. So we have this reader interface, right? And this reader interface tells us that if you want to implement this interface, this reader interface, you have to implement this method called read, right? This read method is going to take a byte slice, it's going to return an integer, it's going to return an error, right? Now, in terms of what the language expects you to do is simply to implement a method that has these parameters and returns these variables, right? But by convention, what you have to do here is you have to make sure that this reader method, right, when you pass a byte slice to it, it's going to read into this byte slice some stream. So, for example, it could be a network socket, it could be a file, it could be anything, right? So it has to populate this byte slice somehow. Then what it's going to do is it's going to return n, which is going to be the number of bytes that were written to this byte slice, right? And optionally, it could return error depending on if something happened, right? So if there was like a network outage, the socket closed, something like that. So basically what's going to happen here is you give this read method a byte slice, right? And the logic is supposed to populate this byte slice so it reads into this byte slice some data, right? That's basically what the reader does. So with a write, as I said before, there's absolutely no logic that you have to implement. All you have to do is you have to implement a method which is called write, right? That takes a byte slice and returns an integer and returns an error, right? Now, here's the thing. The way that the convention goes here is that you give this method a populated byte slice, right? And then it's going to take that byte slice, it's going to write it somewhere else, right? So it's going to take some data, it's going to write it to a network socket, it's going to write it to a file, it could write it to std out, right? It's really up to you. And basically that's how it works, right? So the reader interface and writer interface, they're basically just very simple interfaces, but most of how they're supposed to work is convention. It's not dictated by the language, right? So Golang isn't telling you that you have to do X, Y, or Z with these interfaces. This is more of a thing that the standard library designers kind of honed in on, right? So the standard library designers, they said, this is the reader interface, this is the writer interface, and this is how they're supposed to work, right? So as I said again, the reader it just takes a byte slice and reads into this byte slice some data, right? The writer, it takes a populated byte slice and it writes it somewhere else, right? So to actually show you how this works, I implemented the writer interface and the reader interface. So as you can see, what we're doing here is we are taking a byte slice for the writer, and what we're doing here is we're just printing out this byte slice to std out, right? We're printing this out, and as you can see, this print method will actually return the number of characters written and also an error. So we don't have to manually return those. We just return them with this function call. And for the reader, as you can see, what we're doing here is we're scanning into this byte slice, and that basically reads some data from std in into this byte slice. So I think that's the best I can do to explain how the reader and writer interface work. If you enjoyed this video, give me a like, subscribe, and I will see you later.